On May 15th, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed a significant piece of legislation that officially created the United States Department of Agriculture. President Lincoln referred to the USDA as, quote, the People's Department, end quote. President Lincoln also said, quote, no other human occupation opens so wide a field for the profitable and agreeable combination of labor with the cultivated thought as agriculture, end quote. The first secretary of the Department of Agriculture was a gentleman named Norman J. Coleman. He had become Commissioner of Agriculture on April 3rd, 1865, and became the first USDA secretary in February of 1889. The USDA has always been a remarkable and important part of our nation in terms of scientific excellence and scientific leadership and scientific importance. In 1972, the USDA Forest Service released this ad, courtesy to the Hall of Advertising YouTube channel. Listen to this.
Smokey Bear has got a pal who was always on the prowl. Woodsy is his name, you know, he's the anti-pollution owl. Give a hoot, don't pollute your good outdoor manners show. Leave a trail that's nice and clean wherever you may go. This great country is our own and it's up to us to care. Woodsy Owl will lead the way, so come on, let's do our share. Give a hoot, don't pollute, Woodsy Owl knows what is best. Help him check pollution in the north, southeast, and west. In the north, southeast,
That was in 1972 from the United States Department of Agriculture. On January 20th, 2017, Donald Trump became the 46th President of the United States. And he nominated for the Secretary of Agriculture, he nominated Sonny Perdue to be the Secretary of Agriculture. And ever since then, that department has had many internal disasters. For instance, in June of last year, Politico reported that the Department of Agriculture buried studies indicating that, yes, climate change is an existential threat. But some of the information that the USDA the information that the USDA is essentially withholding, or the Trump administration is getting the USDA to withhold, is essential. For instance, in 2017, USDA scientists discovered that climate change was the cause of nutrient runoff and agricultural pollution in the lower Mississippi River Delta for farmers who were grappling with that. In July of 2018, USDA scientists discovered that coffee was being affected by climate change. Politico reports, quote, a July 2018 finding that coffee can potentially help scientists figure out how to evaluate and respond to the complex interactions between plants, pests, and a changing environment, end quote. So USDA scientists discovered all these things, and the Trump administration is covering it up. And here's another one. Arguably the most essential food on Earth is rice. More than 600 million people on Earth receive more than half of their calories or half of their protein from rice, from consuming rice on a daily basis. In 2019, USDA scientists came to an astonishing conclusion about rice. They discovered that as carbon dioxide increases in the atmosphere, rice loses its vitamins. This means that this crop that more than 600 million people count on will become less nutritious. Politico interviewed one USDA scientist who spoke on the condition of anonymity to avoid retribution. And this USDA scientist said, quote, why the H is the US, which is ostensibly the leader in scientific research, ignoring this? It's not like we're working on something that's esoteric. We're working on something that has dire consequences for the entire planet. You can only postpone reality for so long. End quote. So this was reporting from Politico last year on what the Trump administration was doing to the United States Department of Agriculture. Nevertheless, the Trump administration also infamously ordered USDA scientists to either pack up and move to Kansas City, Missouri, or be fired. Last year in August, the Washington Post reported that President Trump push to allow new logging in Alaska's Tongass National Forest. The Tongass National Forest is a beautiful place. You can actually search it up on Google as you're listening to this. Its origins date back to 1902 when President Theodore Roosevelt issued a proclamation declaring it Alexander Archipelago Forest Reserve. 5 years later, President Roosevelt created a separated Tongass National Forest. Reportedly, both areas were officially consolidated on July 1st, 1908. The Tongass National Forest sits on 16.7 million acres and is one of the U.S.'s largest national forests. But then came the Trump administration, and they basically said, yeah, whatever. The Washington Post reported at the time, quote, "The move would affect more than half of the world's largest intact temperature rainforest, opening it to potentially logging, energy, and mining projects. President Trump has instructed Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue to exempt Alaska's 16.7 million acres Tongass National Forest from logging restrictions imposed nearly 20 years ago." End quote. And this is just absolutely terrible, especially when it comes to climate change. I mean, the United States Department of Agriculture put out a report on how the Tongass National Forest plays a very vital role in the global climate crisis. Quote, "The coastal temperature forests in Alaska currently sequester and store large quantities of carbon. As a result, Alaska plays an important role in the global climate and carbon cycle." End quote. Well, how did the Trump administration respond to that? Well, the Trump administration essentially disregarded that report. And that was very much conspicuous earlier this week on Wednesday, on October 28th, when the Washington Post reported that President Trump is about to strip protections from the Tongass National Forest, which is also referred to as, quote, "America's last climate sanctuary," end quote. So that was reporting from the Washington Post on Wednesday. Well, the Washington Post reports, quote, "As of Thursday, it will be legal for logging companies to build roads and cut and remove timber throughout more than 9.3 million acres of the forest. This decision reverses protections President Bill Clinton put in place in 2001 and is one of the most sweeping public land rollbacks Trump has enacted," end quote. So logging in Alaska is going to cost, and it already does cost U.S. taxpayers millions of dollars each year, and that's because of the long-standing federal mandate, quote, "that companies profit from any timber sale," end quote. That's according to the Washington Post. And so according to a Taxpayer for Commission Sense analysis, over the last 40 years, the Tongass Timber Program has roughly lost $1.7 billion. Has lost roughly $1.7 billion. But, there is some heartening news here, if you are concerned as much as I am. According to the Washington Post, many will take litigation action. Eric Jorgensen, who is the managing attorney for the Alaska Office of Earth Justice, which is an environmental law firm, said, quote, "Years ago, a previous administration tried to eliminate the essential protection from the roadless rule provides on the Tongass, and the courts rejected the attempt. Today's efforts is no better justified, and we believe it will meet a similar fate," end quote. Despite these courageous and remarkable litigation efforts, some experts, however, are still worried that this decision could permit timber sale, which would release more carbon into the air. The Washington Post continues, quote, "Della Sala noted that last month he had to evacuate from his home near Talent, Oregon, because of a massive blaze nearby, a clear sign of how catastrophic climate impacts are already affecting the United States. He says, quote, "It's personal for me. We don't have a lot of time to get this right, and we are heading in the wrong direction," end quote. For the record, this decision to permit logging and remove timber was encouraged by Alaska's Republican Governor Mike Dunleavy and Republican Senator Dan Sullivan. I will leave the link to this Washington Post article in the description of this episode. The Trump administration has just decided to do this at absolutely the worst time. Earlier this week, the Washington Post reported that 90,000 people in Southern California were ordered to evacuate because of these large wildfires. Well, on Thursday, those evacuation orders were lifted, but still remained for some areas. Today, this was the headline at thehour.com, quote, burned, beetle ravaged, Wyoming forest expected to flourish, end quote. The Hour continues with a reporting, quote, the morning of September 17th, as Scott Butler clambered over fallen log after fallen log and around dead trees as far as he could see, he thought about how only a fire could create the renewal long needed. The Savage Run Wilderness nestled in the southern end of the Snowy Range had been ravaged for years by the mountain pine beetle. Like most of the range, it was covered in more dead trees than live ones. And now, more than a month after the Mullen Fire tore through more than 175,000 acres of mountainside and destroyed dozens of homes and buildings, wildfires biologists, hunters, and other forest users are beginning to think about that transition from beetle kill to wildfire. If there is a silver lining to the Target wildfire, if there is a silver lining to the largest wildfire in Wyoming's recent history, it's the eventual benefit for wildlife, they say. Quote, it really pushed a reset button for the entire forest. Ryan Amusdun, who is a terrestrial habitat biologist for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, continues, quote, if we had it done on our terms, I would like to see 170,000 acres burned over 20 years, not all at once, end quote. Today, the Denver Post reported that the Cameron Peak and East Troublesome wildfire are remaining silent today. Quote, Colorado's massive wildfire remains quiet Sunday with no growth as snow from last week's storm melts across the region. The Cameron Peak fire remained at 208,663 acres as of Sunday, or about 326 square miles, and 64% of that fire is contained. The East Troublesome fire remained at 193,774 acres, or 303 square miles, and 37% of that fire is contained. Firefighters along the East Troublesome fire expect to see pockets of smoldering and heat, but no significant growth even as temperatures rise into the 50s and winds pick up Sunday, according to a morning update from fire officials, end quote. On Friday, a person told The Guardian in reference to the Colorado wildfires, quote, the season is off the charts, end quote. And in the midst of all of this, the Trump administration has just decided that now maybe is a great idea to permit logging and timber sales in one of the nation's largest climate sanctuaries. This is an ongoing story, so we will keep you updated as more news develops. We'll be right back.